Tom Cruise returned as Maverick earlier this summer. This time his character flies a Super Hornet fighter in the sequel to the 1986 movie Top Gun. This same aircraft also touched down in Goa around that time, and it could become a new milestone in India-US relations. You're watching the first edition of StratPost NewsReel, and I'm Saurabh Joshi asking the question, could India finally acquire its first US-built fighter aircraft, the F-A-18 Super Hornet? The US Navy deployed two of these fighters to Goa. Why? So the Indian Navy is looking for new fighter aircraft, and it has the most complicated requirements in the world for two reasons. See, the Navy already operates the INS Vikramaditya, and it's inducting the indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant. Both are stow-bar carriers, short takeoff but arrested recovery. They launch aircraft from ramps on the front of the carrier. The next carrier is planned to be much larger and launch aircraft with catapults using what's called the catobar system. Catapult assisted takeoff but arrested recovery. This increases the range and weapons a fighter can carry and also the kinds of aircraft that can operate from aircraft carriers. Stow-bar carriers have a ramp while catobar carriers are completely flat. No other navy in the world has this mix of carriers, although the Chinese have just gone down this road. So India needs a fighter that can operate from both stow-bar as well as catobar carriers. The Navy's existing MiG-29K fighters can't do it. In fact, no fighter in the world operates like that today. The second issue is that the new fighter also has to fit on Indian carriers. The flight deck and hangar deck aren't a problem, but aircraft are transported between these two decks by an elevator. And the elevators on the Vikramaditya and Vikrant were meant to accommodate smaller fighters like the MiG-29K and the Naval LCA. So any new fighter has to be able to fit in the elevators on the two aircraft carriers. These two issues make the Indian Navy's requirements the most complex in the world. The Navy has only two fighters in the world to choose from, Boeing's F-A-18 Super Hornet and the Rafale M built by the French Dassault. Both fighters are catobar aircraft, so they have to prove that they can take off from the Navy's stow-bar carriers. The Rafale M carried out these trials in Goa earlier this year. The Super Hornet has already done similar tests in the US in 2020, and it came to Goa to demonstrate the capability to the Indian Navy, taking off from the shore-based test facility and carrying out arrested landings with the Russian origin Svetlana Arestagaya. Neither fighter is a perfect fit on Indian aircraft carriers, but the Super Hornet has an edge with its folding wings and an automated system for handling the fighter. Boeing says the Super Hornet will fit on the elevators of both carriers without any problems. But the wings of the naval Rafale don't fold, so their answer is to remove the wingtips of the fighter and maybe even the nose cone every time the Rafale M has to be moved between decks. Now, we don't know if that's practical, but here's something else to think about. Landing an aircraft is generally considered the most difficult part of flight operations. The risk is greater if it's a military aircraft, and it goes up even more if it has to land on a short runway on a small moving platform in the middle of the ocean and then only be able to stop itself from going over the other side into the waters by hooking its tail on one of the arrestor wires laid across the deck. The pilot has to account for angle of attack, sea state, wind speed, velocity of the aircraft carrier, and the weight of the aircraft, among other things. Then the pilot has to make sure the aircraft has enough speed so that if by chance the aircraft's tail hook misses the wires, it's able to take off immediately from the deck of the carrier. And sometimes the pilot has to do all this at night. It's the most dangerous routine thing that carrier pilots have to do every time they take off. This is where the magic carpet precision landing mode comes in. The US Navy developed this software for Super Hornets to make carrier landings a lot easier. It massively reduces the workload required to land on the carrier safely. Without the magic carpet PLM, a pilot has to make around 300 adjustments in the final 18 seconds of the aircraft's approach to the carrier. With the Magic Carpet PLM, that figure of 300 comes down to single digits, fewer than 10 adjustments. It'll even work in case of an engine failure and allow the fighter to stay in balanced flight and land safely. Honestly, it sounds a bit like a cheat code in a video game, but it will dramatically reduce errors, accidents, and expenditure by simply decreasing the stress, time, and attempts required for pilots to qualify on carriers and to carry out their missions. And it's not an optional extra or enhancement of some kind that needs to be especially developed. The latest update of the Magic Carpet PLM was tested and approved last year, and it is standard on all 3 blocks of the Super Hornet. It's been demonstrated in Goa to show how precisely the fighter can land, touching down around the same spot every time. Next, the Navy is looking for 26 new fighters. Of these 26, 8 have to be 2-seat fighters. The Super Hornet comes in both single-seat and 2-seat variants. The naval Rafale M is only a single-seat aircraft. The 2-seat Rafale is an Air Force fighter and can't operate from aircraft carriers. So if the Rafale is picked, only 18 of those 26 fighters would be capable of carrier operations. Another difference? The Super Hornet can carry up to 4 Harpoon anti-ship missiles at one time, but the Rafale M can carry only a single Exocet anti-ship missile. Then numbers. The French Navy operates some 40-odd Rafale M fighters. The US Navy has acquired around 800 Super Hornet airframes over the years, with over 600 Block 2 Super Hornets alone. Between them, they've notched up 2.5 million flight hours. The last Block 2 Super Hornet rolled out of the factory only last year. All of them will be upgraded to the latest Block 3 variant. The US Navy has also ordered 78 new Block 3 Super Hornets over and above that. Why does this matter? Generally speaking, the bigger the fleet, the easier and cheaper it is to maintain and operate. So what is this latest Block 3 Super Hornet? One of the biggest jumps in capability, the service life of the Block 3 aircraft has almost doubled, from 6,000 flight hours to 10,000 flight hours. This is important because it increases the usable life of the aircraft by almost 100% and reduces the number of aircraft that might ultimately be needed over time. India has never operated a US fighter before, but there have been plenty of French fighters in the Indian inventory, including the Rafale, which is operated by the Indian Air Force. But is it right for the Navy? Given what we've just seen, if you launch from a runway that can sail anywhere in the world and buddy refuel from other fighters on your team, the Super Hornet comes across as more practical and capable. The Navy requires deliveries to begin within 3 years of signing the order. But with the Vikrant now entering service, these new aircraft might be needed much quicker. Boeing makes Super Hornets at a nominal rate of around 2 a month. And if it does get selected, it will become the first US fighter to wear Indian roundels. But whether it's the Navy or the Air Force, India's choice of fighters will now also depend on some new factors that have emerged recently. For example, if the Rafale is selected, how quickly could it be manufactured? As it turns out, it might take longer than expected. That's why France is offering used second-hand aircraft to begin with. All that and more next week. But for now, if you enjoyed StratPost NewsReel, pass it on. Like, share, retweet, follow and subscribe wherever you're watching this. Until next time.